There are no words that can be said to describe the sheer horror of seeing this come across your Twitter feed and realizing that a person who did very real good in the world, who cared for others, and was compassionate at an age when a lot of kids aren't, let's face it, was attacked brutally and taken out of this world. I cannot imagine what her family's going through.
Brianna's family said in a statement, Brianna was a much-loved daughter, granddaughter, and baby sister. She was a larger-than-life character who would leave a lasting impression on all that met her. Brianna was beautiful, witty, and hilarious. Brianna was strong, fearless, and one of a kind.
Hey everyone. So, there's not really any way to start this off that doesn't suck, and yeah.
We even had to take a break from streaming to come back to this topic, so here we are.
Here we are. We're going to try to get through this as easy as possible. Trigger warnings for
transphobia, death, violence,
and just a lot of stuff happening. What the hell? This is not working. 1 second. No, that should be paused. Is the other one not off? The other one is off. So why am I not getting... You know what? It's fine.
unless it's the pie hole, but I don't, or it's Vivaldi itself.
No, because it loaded just fine yesterday.
Oh, okay, yeah, it might just be Vivaldi then, maybe.
Yeah, it's fine.
All right, well.
Anyway, so
Ad blockers are being a butt.
Let's go. So, for what everyone knows is that sometime last week, there was a 16-year-old British girl by the name of Brianna Ghey who was murdered in cold blood by two 15-year-olds, I believe. There were two 15-year-olds charged with this in Warrington. And let's see here. Two teenagers have been charged with the murder of Brianna Ghey, who was stabbed to death in a park in Warrington. The body of the 16-year-old from Birchwood in Warrington was discovered in Linear Park, Culcheth, fuck British words, on Saturday afternoon on the 11th February 2023. Cheshire, that's weird, police say a 15-year-old girl from Warrington and a 15-year-old boy from Leigh were charged on Wednesday, February 15th. The pair appeared at Chester Magistrate Court the same day, where they were reprimanded into youth detention. Prosecutors Leanne Gallagher told the court Brianna's death was extremely brutal and punishing. Police were exploring whether Brianna, who was a transgender girl, was the victim of a hate crime. The answer to this is yes. The two teens appeared separately in the dock and spoke only to confirm their names and addresses during the short hearing. Both were supported by their parents in court and were flanked by one dock officer throughout the hearing. The mother and the father of the girl both appeared emotional as their daughter was brought into court. They were both remanded into youth detention by District Judge Jack McGarva to appear at Liverpool Crown Court on Thursday, February 16th. In a tribute issued after Brianna's death on behalf of her family, they said the teenager was a much-loved daughter, granddaughter, and baby sister. The statement continued, she was a larger-than-life character who would leave a lasting impression on all that met her. Brianna was beautiful, witty, and hilarious. Brianna was strong, fearless, and one of a kind. The loss of her young life has left a massive hole in our family, and we know that the teachers and her friends who were involved in her life feel the same. A GoFundMe crowdfunding page set up to help Brianna's family to pass the, I think that's 888. Was that 88,000
euros? Just 2 days after it was launched.
Is that euros or pounds? That's pounds, I think.
Pounds. I'm sorry.
That's okay. They're British.
We're bad at this, but
yeah. So we have another article from Vice talking about her trans sisters. 6 of Brianna Ghey's. Do you want to read this one?
Yeah. 6 of Brianna Ghey's close friends have told Vice World News how the trans teenager who was stabbed to death in northern England changed their lives. One friend said that 16-year-old Brianna had been cruelly ripped away from us, as they remember how she helped them access medical care for their transitions, had to deal with transphobic bullies, and documented her ups and downs of being a trans girl online. I don't feel like reading some of the
read of that.
Yeah, some of the...
Police have been working on a motive of attack. We will talk about that in a moment. Had earlier said that there was no evidence that Brianna's gender identity was a factor in killing. However, on Tuesday, police issued a new statement to say they were not ruling out the possibility. Well, thank God.
She made me feel unstoppable as a trans girl, and really pretty because she would never let me put myself down, said Amelia, who, like the other friends of Brianna we spoke to, agreed to speak on the condition only their first names be used so they could speak more openly.
Met Brianna 3 years ago on TikTok.
I met Brianna 3 years ago. 3 years ago. We met through TikTok when she was new to the app, when she just started doing makeup videos, Amelia said. She was posting about the fact she was trans, and I told her straight away that I am too, because at that moment, I didn't have any trans friends. Do you have a story to share? We'd love to hear from you. Oh,
that's the thing, yeah.
Never mind. We were just really similar, and we told each other everything. We even started hormones together. We were supposed to be meeting up later this year, and we'd been planning for months how we wanted to have a life together. We would plan our future apartment and how we'd go and get our hair done, have our surgeries, but now I'm having to think about doing that all by myself. Doing all of that by myself. Shanna is 16 and lives in Cornwall, England. She first met Brianna last year in an Instagram group chat.
Cornwall?
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
Just fine. It's fine. Yours sounded better. Continue.
We're both trans women from small villages, so our support network is all internet-based, and people don't understand how big that network is. We all know and support each other, she said. Brianna was one of the most open people I've ever met. It's obvious she was struggling with her mental health and being bullied online and in real life. There's no denying that. But she kept going. It didn't ever stop her doing anything, continued Shanna?
Yeah, Shanna. Yeah, probably Shanna. Or Channa, one of the two.
Yeah. I'd never met anyone who started their transition so young, who was so respectful and welcoming to other trans women. Not catty at all. She'd help younger trans women to safely and legally access hormones, advising them about private doctors and congratulating them on progress. I'm just so angry and sad. The sweetest 16-year-old girl who was a beacon of positivity, now gone.
So, why don't we talk about this for a second? There are no words that can be said to describe the sheer horror of seeing this come across your Twitter feed and realizing that a person who did very real good in the world, who cared for others, and was compassionate at an age when a lot of kids aren't, let's face it, was attacked brutally and taken out of this world. I cannot imagine what her family's going through. We'll be talking about more about what happened during this whole story coming out, but right now I think it's just important to focus on Brianna. I mean, so when this girl's, what is this? Where is the one that I need? That's the op-ed. Looking for a specific one. Oh. So one of the things to recognize is when this came out, there was already hints of transphobia about the situation. The initial story had her listed as a murder investigation underway after a teenage girl was found. Continue. After a transgender teen. This was the stuff that unfortunately kind of came around this. We saw basically UK media just try to pretend this wasn't a thing. Like, no joke. And in a lot of ways, it felt like it was being downplayed. We talked about earlier about we talked about earlier about how the police initially said it wasn't a hate crime, and the fact of the matter is there's no other way to actually, like, categorize this. This girl was known to be harassed at school and online for being trans. She was open and out about her transness and was an incredibly caring person who absolutely helped a lot of the trans women around her. And for the police to try to frame this as somehow anything other than what it was is absolutely disgusting. Additionally, there was a lot of people, especially conservatives and the like, posting some really disgusting stuff that I won't show you, including a fake tombstone that was posted by valid people posting their L's that had an altered version of her name as the male version of Brianna. This was echoed throughout a lot of the internet by conservatives because what we were starting to notice is that there was a push to sort of erase her, to not say her name, to not gender her correctly. This was partially pushed back on with the hashtag say her name and dignity for Brianna. We'll be getting to why some of that hashtags and why some of that awareness was tainted. But overall, this girl was taken out of the world, and somehow her story got lost or put away or hidden because it was deemed as somehow not as important, or just a way to make fun of trans people. I saw people posting that other individuals had been killed, which is fair, though a little cold. And if I want my honest opinion.
Yeah.
When we're trying to deal with the death of a fairly publicized, situation, those other people do deserve care, and they do deserve awareness. But when you bring them up in a particular way, it feels like you're minimizing.
Like they were only good enough to bring up just because the topic was already there.
Well, either that, or that the original person who started the topic is sort of, at that point, more for the purpose of bringing up these other names rather than actually focusing on the grief around this one girl's death. Like, there's two ways you can frame it. Neither of them are great. Right now, the trans community has been in shock over this. And again, the fact that this could happen so openly and disturbingly is horrifying.
Well, and especially scary and frustrating because the person who chose to be out and open and chose to be the one that was coordinating and helping other people transition, right, is the one that was also probably likely to be noticed a lot in a way that didn't lead to good ends.
One of the things we talk about with trans girls and trans women is that every trans person, regardless of their identity, deals with a particular variation of transphobia, and each of them suck. And we said on this channel before that they all suck in their own ways. With a case of trans men, you deal with invisibility. A way in which they are not really seen or aware. People are not as aware of their existence.
Yeah, a lot of erasure just out the gate.
And when you do see them, there's sort of this misgendering a la sexism versus, oh, you're a girl, you're being manipulated by the trans cult, you don't know what you want. Like, it's weird because you're like misgendering them while also doing a sexism.
Or they're like, it's cute while they're while they're still kind of like a bit more femme, and then they're just like a cute boyish face. But then like as soon as you grow up, grow a little bit past that, it's like, oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With non-binary people, it's ridicule. They're treated as not real. They are treated as invisible or, something worthy of ridicule. Like, just that's how it is. It's fucking awful. With trans women, what we get is hypervisibility. When one of us does well, our victories and our successes are torn down. When we are interviewed by news agencies or various other things, these people have in the past just randomly asked us about our genitals in public. Weird. Whenever something happens involving a trans woman, it is magnified immensely. And the reason for this is because of a thing that Julia Serrano coined, which is called transmisogyny. That is the intersection between transness, something that is by cis people, something to be feared for some reason, and misogyny, again, the hatred of women. So the combination of hatred of trans people and the hatred of women creates this intersection of hypervisibility and a way in which trans women get a very special kind of transphobia. That's not to say the other ones aren't horrible or just as bad, but the special type we get, and this is really important with the situation with Brianna, is what happens is that we are treated with that hypervisibility because of the fact that in some core part of cis people's brains, they don't really understand why a person who's born as a boy would want to be a girl. We live in such a misogynistic society that the idea that an AMAB person could be a girl is so shocking that what it leads to is these bizarre coping strategies. One example would be Ray Blanchard's autogynephilia. No other trans group, be them non-binary, xenogender, trans men, transmasc, fill in the blanks of every single person under the umbrella, none of them have a theory like this. One that essentially reduces you down to a paraphilia, that you are doing this because of a fetish.
Yeah, right. Blanchard erases everybody else and then focuses all the other shit on particularly trans women.
I'll have to look for that thread one of these days about Blanchard and how he basically was like, yeah, no, getting reports from actually trans people suck because they lie, so we'll just have to make it up as we go. Trans men are actually under that theory. They are not. At least not according to Serrano and within people who have done studies around this. There's a version of this where we talk about transmisogyny affected versus transmisogyny excluded. It's a very big debate online, and there's a lot of people who feel very strongly about it. I tend to think it's more important to just create language for each person. I don't really want to put other people under transmisogyny because I don't see trans men get the same treatment. It's not to say they don't get transphobia.
That, and there's a weird way that transmisogyny is still, I find at least, misgendering trans men. Right? The idea that, like, the hatred of women, like, to use that for trans men, you still have, you're basically going back to assume that they're still women somehow. So I think the last time we talked on this channel, we'd kind of fallen on transandrophobia.
Transandrophobia was the one we settled on, and Nightwild. The thing you have to remember is we live in a time and culture right now where essentially you are, again, if you were called pedophiles, that's probably because of the whole groomer thing conservatives doing. Paraphiles, I'd have to see the specific post or thing because I've literally never seen that, and there's no paraphilia that even in historical text would show that.
Yeah. Well, maybe that person was just even weirder because they're saying that you've had people call you that. So yeah, no, there might be some really weird stuff coming out of various transphobes' mouth that don't actually even understand what they're saying.
And Yugimoto's correct. Trans men are often treated more as lost lesbian sisters.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the problem says, I don't know, I disagree that trans men can't be affected by misogyny because we're not women. Transphobia means we're viewed and treated as women because we aren't believed. Yeah. And so this is why I would say transandrophobia, because I think there are different things projected on you as on trans men. I don't know if you're a trans man, but on trans men that are different than trans women. Again, you are not going to move me on this.
Well, it's
There is no difference. Like, there is no equal thing for non-binary people or trans men to autogynephilia.
yeah. So the intersections that people are getting stuck on. Yes, if you were born AFAB, you've dealt with misogyny, okay? But at least right now we're kind of. This gets us deeper into like the intersectional theories, okay? That's really what's going on here. And so if I'm talking about transmisogyny, I'm usually talking the point where people out in the world can see you, at least see you as a woman or see you enough as a woman to criticize and hurt you, okay? And that's more
typical misogyny because, again...
well, I'm just going with the word. When we say the transmisogyny, it's that you start getting that weird intersection of society sees you as kind of enough of a woman to, like, still hate you, but you're trans, so they still really, really hate you, and you've got both of those stacked on top of each other.
And, of course, being AMAB then leads to the idea that this must be for some sort of fetish or some other thing. Again, I'm not saying that trans men and non-binary... This is all off topic from what we're trying to get onto, so I would really appreciate not getting into a stun lock over this. Like, I will start banning people. The reality is that regardless, that's the theory of transmisogyny. You can argue it or not. But what I'm trying to get to is, when you are a girl like Brianna, who is open and honest and dealing with very real harassment online, and you're also the person that is leading other people to start the process of transitioning and finding themselves, it is entirely possible that those reasons, that transmisogyny, that hypervisibility, and that intersection of being an activist leads to potentially how this happened. And I don't know for sure. I can't be in the heads of the people that did this, but this is why you see a lot of times, like, this is where, you know, with trans women, a lot of times this is the thing that we have to deal with. We can be killed in this fashion. We can be killed by partners. We can, in some states, that's legal. Right? Like, this is sort of the horror of the situation is that, like, this girl had her whole life ahead of her, and she was killed because she was truthful about her identity.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Well, like, this hurts equally for me to see too, because I often find myself, especially nowadays, very, very protective of my trans femme friends, right? I'm usually the person that goes with friends when they're going shopping for the first time, or the first couple of times, right? I've kind of scouted out enough places because, you know, generally I went alone my first few times to get, like, men's clothing, so I just kind of dealt with shit. But I make sure I go with all my trans friends, right? Like, I don't let my trans femme friends go shopping for girls' clothes alone the first few times.
And if you're at the store with them, you go to the bathroom with them.
Oh yeah, no, I go to the bathroom with them. I'm like nearby the changing rooms. Like, no, like I am there to make sure that nothing happens. No one says anything. If there are any store clerks that, like, need to interact with us for some reason, like, I am there. Okay.
Because it's not to say that other members of the trans community don't deal with this stuff, but again, it happens in a particular way for each of them. It's not to say that, like, trans men don't deal with misogyny. They do, but they don't deal with transmisogyny as defined by Julia Serrano. People are getting hung up on language. So the issue is that what I'm trying to make very clear to all of you is that this hypervisibility can lead to these outcomes.
Can lead particularly to the visceral violence and the murder part more than the other ones would, which is not meant to cause rifts, people, okay? It really sucks that that's the way it is. Like,
I think every time transmisogyny ever comes up on this channel, there's people who get very confused by it because they don't understand what the actual theory is. So they just break down the words as they exist, and the issue is that they don't actually understand what they're talking about. Like, again, this is defined as by Serrano, and again, if you understand it in that context as that theory, it makes perfect sense within that context, and it is something that genuinely trans women deal with. This is not to say that other members of the trans community don't deal with stuff, but they deal with it in different orders and in different magnitudes, and usually it's very different. The misogyny that, say, trans men deal with, for example, usually starts with a level of denying your identity, followed by typical misogyny you'd see towards an AFAB person. Transmisogyny, and that usually leads towards sort of an invisibility because we genuinely treat, women as less than in our society. The intersection of transmisogyny, on the other hand, leads to a hypervisibility, which is very different. We don't see that same phenomenon with other trans people. So again, you could argue this, but this is what the theory is, and it's one that I hold to very, very closely.
I honestly think that this disparity also traumatizes everybody too.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, we are somehow in this weird way of how do we grieve for this, right? We somehow have to hold on to our own pain and then also, each other's pains, and they're conflicting feelings, right? Like, the feeling of, like, I could be murdered versus I am utterly invisible and I want to be seen aren't necessarily the same feeling, right? And I do think that makes this really challenging. And I know a lot of people too, like, I know plenty of people in the trans community who do similar things to what Brianna did with sharing transition stuff, and helping people, like, progress through their transition. Like, they don't care who's coming to them, what gender they are. Like, the goal is I help. Like, that's about that. Like, the same doctor who does hormones is going to do hormones for everybody, right?
Duval, your answer to that question is AFAB and AMAB are assigned female at birth and assigned male at birth.
Yeah, not to be confused with
ACAB, which is all cops are bastards.
Yeah.
The transmisogyny primer by Serrano is quite good, Connor. I highly recommend it. The problem, I'd be curious what your concerns are, because I think that if I know where she's going with her arguments on tomboys, it'd be interesting to see. But again, this is all side note. I do think there's an argument to be made that there is a level of tolerance, but there's also a difference between tomboys and butch, so I'd be curious where she puts that distinction. Anyway, the point being is that past all this stunlock, I just want to get really clear about the fact that this is sort of the curse of being a trans woman, is that in some ways this hypervisibility is one of the reasons why sometimes our deaths get very highly publicized in a way that other deaths don't. In the other hand, that same hypervisibility is what's going to lead to this type of behavior, because we're more noticeable, because we're viewed as threats. Like, what is it? Dear Yugimoto said in site chat, trans men are often disregarded while trans women are often vilified. Again, like,
by the sheer
notice the attacks on drag queens.
Yeah, I was gonna say, by the sheer magic of having a penis, you are somehow a threat because of that. Because that is somehow representative of the hormone and the patriarchy and every bad thing that's ever happened.
I mean, we can get into a whole bunch of weird discussions about the way that stuff's looked at, but we can talk about that later. But again, I just really want to be clear about this, despite the theory stunlock for some reason chat got on, is that, like, I think that there's an argument to be made here that this situation should have been a catalyst to really work towards this level of change. We'll be talking about this in another segment, but this happened right before a massive round of discourse, followed by a huge sudden awareness about the New York Times. And in a lot of ways, between this huge discourse that was really, really painful, which we'll be talking about in a separate thing, and then the New York Times stuff, essentially what ended up happening is that it feels like this girl's death has not really been given the adequate, like, attention it should have been. I think this story needs to be kept up with, and it sucks because I feel for her family. And I think both of us really wish that someone could have stopped this from happening. I know that's an obvious thing to say, but it feels needed. It feels like it's needed to be said.
Right. Well, and from somebody I saw in chat, Falera, heck, even her family was trying to keep, her dead name out of the news, right? Like, they were on this girl's side. They did not want to put that out there, right? And fuck, the news wanted to anyways. Or news outlets, right? Various ones.
So yeah, I guess just we'll get to the other stuff in a minute, but I just want to say that again, we wish Brianna's family all of the care, all of the support. If you can donate to the GoFundMe, do so. I think it's raised a bunch of money, but it probably needs more. Her family probably needs that kind of help.
Especially if there's going to have to be any. I'm not exactly sure how.
And again, we joke
cases go. So
yeah, we joke on our site about like, because we really like SCP stuff, and so we joke about like, secure and protect trans kids and contain. What is it? Secure, protect trans kids and contain conservatives. To some degree, this stands the same thing that happened when like we've been saying over and over again, protect trans kids. Otherwise, this is what's going to happen. And with the stochastic terrorism of the conservatives saying over and over again, we're groomers or we're some sort of monsters, this is going to be the result. Right? So, with that said, we'll end this part of the segment here. We'll see you in the next one. Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching. If you could like, comment, and subscribe, we'd really appreciate it. If you want to support the channel further, you could go to patreon.com/ZenaandPoppy, and you could become a patron for as low as $3. If you want to support us further, you could donate below with a super thanks comment, or you could, in fact, even go to our website, which is currently transgirltherapist.org. You can go there and either donate directly, or you can even get a subscription and get a cool colored name and chat next time we stream. Anyway, thank you again.